As we all know by now, the guns in Starfield are absolutely abysmal. They're easily among the ugliest, most unlikable gun designs in all of gaming. You see, about 2.5 years ago, I reviewed all the guns in Starfield, and that video has racked up over 5 million views by now. Almost, 6 million now. Damn, people really hate these things. I'm really glad people love clowning on Bethesda's guns, just as much as I. It's gotta be my favorite pastime. It brings me great joy. So I was absolutely elated to find out that Bethesda added new guns with their DLCs. Oh waiter, more sloppy sci-fi guns to review please. It got me wondering though, did Bethesda listen to the criticism and come up with much better, more appealing designs? Did they finally straighten out their quality control and deliver us practical and functional firearms with high quality animations? No, this is Bethesda, and Bethesda never changes. These guns are littered with all kinds of boneheaded errors that destroy my immersion. And it's my job to expose these errors so everyone can see just how sloppy these guns truly are. I must expose everything wrong with the DLC guns in Starfield. Let's start off strong with my favorite new design, the breech block. I don't know what I'm looking at here. It looks like someone threw a German V8 engine block into outer space, and it spontaneously cold welded with a bunch of random space trash for a few decades, until eventually, it culminated into this giant hulking abomination. It doesn't resemble a gun in the slightest. It looks more like those mountainous piles of trash in India. There is zero rhyme or reason or visual cohesion to this design. The designer just made some bullshit. Apparently, it's supposed to be a 40mm automatic grenade launcher. Automatic grenade launchers are inherently going to be big and bulky, but this one is morbidly obese. Not only that, but it has a copious amount of random greebles. It's festooned with nonsense to the absolute max. You have to sit here and think, what is all this random bullshit doing? Why does it need this big metal exoskeleton that wraps around the whole gun? Why are there so many random tubes and wires? Why is the receiver so big and bloated like... Why is the Well, I can't say this, dude. I can't say this fucking line, dude. Why? Okay, time to get serious. Why is the receiver so big and bloated like furry inflation art? And why is the barrel so fat and girthy like the barrel shroud of a Lewis gun? My god, this is like the Fallout 4 assault rifle, but even worse. The breech block is the epitome of sci-fi SLOP gun design. It has an absurd amount of nonsensical greebles and random details that serve no purpose. Now compare this hunk of scrap metal to the real-life Mark 19. You see how this launcher looks rather simple and sleek? There's not a bunch of random greebles? And it is bulky, but it's not excessively bulky. It's appropriately sized. That's how real guns look. But this designer was trying way too hard to make it visually interesting by adding all this extra crap on there. It's like a kindergartner decorating their art project by slathering on a bunch of random macaroni noodles, and glitter, and maybe a few boogers too. They probably think more details makes the gun look cooler, but if you put on too many greebles, it creates the opposite effect, and the design just ends up looking like a horrific eldritch abomination. I know I've been using this term quite a bit, but the breech block genuinely looks AI generated. Dare I say, it's the most AI generated gun I've ever seen. This is exactly how AI generates gun designs. It doesn't fully understand the fine details and where certain parts need to go, or why it has those parts in the first place. It just takes a bunch of random guns as references, then jumbles everything together and spits out a malformed mutant. The designer probably typed into ChatGPT, Jarvis, generate me a picture of a futuristic sci-fi heavy automatic grenade launcher. Okay, good. Now make it look like it was made from parts found in a landfill. Good. Now make it look like it was made by space raiders. Give it more random greebles, make it even bulkier, and make it overly complicated like a German V8 engine. Awesome. Now make the barrel longer, give it a random metal frame, a motorcycle grip, and remove the stock. Fantastic! Now touch it up a little bit more. Perfect! This is an absolute masterpiece. I shall call this work of art the Breech Block Mark II. And my goodness, I love all the stupid-ass details this AI crafted up. Like when I said make it overly complicated like a German V8 engine, it took that extremely literally and just placed an engine in the gun with a BMW label on it. It even has a bunch of iron crosses, simply because I said German, because as we all know, it's not German if it doesn't have an iron cross on it. I'm also a big fan of the DACA is law marking. That is extremely based. But there's also writing that says crump or die? What the fuck is crump? Funnily enough, I found the first generated image to be visually more appealing than the breach block. I mean, this generated image is still absolutely horrendous. It's an affront to God. But if you squint your eyes, it's not quite as bad as Bethesda's gun designs. Only a human could create something so intentionally bad. Meanwhile, AI just steals from real artists and spits out poor amalgamated imitations. With this one especially, it sure looks an awfully lot like it would be a cyberpunk gun. And that's because the AI basically stole references from Cyberpunk and spit out this image. It has Militech weapon systems in the top right corner, so they're not even trying to hide it. It blatantly ripped off Cyberpunk's art style. And damn, it's kinda scary how good AI is getting with text now. It's finally literate. It can generate properly spelt words. It even gave the grenade launcher a name, the GL-47. It also wrote up a stat sheet with a bunch of random made-up numbers that don't make any sense. Bethesda's gun designers better watch out. AI might genuinely take their job soon. I get the intention here is to make a scrappy, handmade Space Raider grenade launcher, but it doesn't have to look like literal trash. Bethesda has this false conception that handmade weapons have to be made from literal trash to fit the handmade aesthetic, but that's not the case at all. Handmade guns may look scrappy and crude, but they aren't made by slapping together random pieces of garbage. They tend to be rather simple, and every part serves a purpose. If I have one good thing to say about the breach block, well, I guess it's kind of fun to use in gameplay. It's an automatic grenade launcher, so naturally, it's going to be fun to blow people up with a flurry of grenades. Although, it does seem rather weak. It can take like 3 to 4 grenades to kill a basic enemy. I'm not sure if I can pin the blame on this particular weapon though. I think it's more a problem with the whole game. Some enemies are huge bullet sponges that can eat 40mm grenades straight to the face, while others die instantly, simply by tickling their toes. It's all because of the RPG, MMO, looter, shooter, Borderlands style level scaling. I don't want to get too deep into a huge, long-winded balancing rant, so I'll just say, the balancing in Starfield is fundamentally broken. That's why I don't care to do an in-depth performance review on every single weapon, or else we would be here all day. When it comes to the function, I do think it's interesting how this isn't shooting typical grenades. They're rocket-propelled grenades. That's a pretty good idea. That means your grenades have a lot more range, and you don't have to compensate for drop nearly as much. Paired with the long barrel, this would make for quite a good long-range grenade launcher. So it makes no sense as to why there's no sights, no irons, no optics or anything. You just gotta eyeball that shit. Even worse, the rocket velocity is comically slow. These rockets move slower than regular grenades. It seems they're on the same pace as Nerf darts. This is a super common trope in video games. They always depict rockets as being super slow, with a projectile speed of like 100 feet per second, when in reality, they can travel up to 1,000 feet per second. When you put all that together, this launcher is only useful for close quarters combat, and that's quite a huge safety hazard. If you're not careful, you may blow yourself up. As usual, I'm not a big fan of the animations. This don't really feel like a hefty automatic grenade launcher. There's no weight behind your movements. You just throw it around like it's an SMG. The reload is pretty lazy too. It's not belt fed. You just got this big box that you shove into the side of the gun. It's not clear how the magazine is locked in place. You just toss it in there like you're haphazardly throwing a frozen pizza into an oven. This launcher absolutely should be belt fed. Functionally, that would work way better, and you would get a higher capacity. Plus, it would look way cooler. But sadly, Bethesda doesn't know how to animate belt-fed guns. That requires skilled animators, and Bethesda doesn't have skilled animators. So they intentionally avoid making certain types of guns that require intricate animations, like belt-fed machine guns and guns with internal magazines. Pretty much everything has to use a detachable box magazine, so the animation can be as simple as possible. All around, the breach block is a Category 5 disaster. It's a complete and utter failure of gun design. No joke, this is the worst gun design I've seen so far. I challenge you guys to find something worse. Please let me know in the comments if you guys know of any other designs that can rival the hideous breach block. From what I've seen, this has got to be the worst gun design in gaming history. It no-diffs the Fallout 4 assault rifle, and it clears all the other abominations in Starfield, no problem. Bethesda has really outdone themselves. They consistently achieve new lows I'd never thought possible. It's quite a monumental feat to create a gun design that's so viscerally disgusting. The breach block deserves a spot lower than the Fallout 4 assault rifle, even lower than the Abyss. The breach block belongs in the abysmal dogshit tier. Whew, I'm gonna have to take a break after that one. I should play my favorite new mobile game. It's today's sponsor, Trophy Hunter. As you can guess, Trophy Hunter is a hunting game. What makes it especially interesting is that you'll compete with other players to see who's the better hunter. There's 14 arenas to compete in. Each comes with their own unique environment and animals to hunt. It goes from basic wild hogs and white-tailed deer, all the way to exotic rhinos and elephants. There's a whole lot of cool guns to use too, and I sure like using cool guns. The best part is that Trophy Hunter is doing a $30,000 giveaway with $500 Bass Pro gift cards. You get a chance to win once you reach Arena 4, and once again at Arena 7. There's all kinds of in-game rewards you can win, but if you're super lucky, you just may win the ultimate prize. If I won that Bass Pro gift card, you already know what I'm spending it on. Make sure to go to trophyhunterchallenge.com and enter your player ID to spin the lucky wheel. But what about the gameplay, you may ask? Well, boy, I tell ya, it's highly addicting and extremely immersive. It's all about patience and precision. The cleaner and more precise your shots are, the higher your score. And in the end, the best hunter wins. To properly take down your prey, you have to aim for their critical areas, such as the heart or the brain. It's especially tricky when there's multiple animals that are running full speed sideways at long range. You have to adjust for movement and drop, all while avoiding obstacles and aiming for that tiny critical area all at the same time. I really appreciate the high skill requirement. It was extremely fun to flex on noobs with my supreme aim. If you want to try out Trophy Hunter for yourself, be sure to use my code or link in the description. It'll give you an awesome bonus pack which includes a Beretta rifle and special bullets to match. Also, let me know in the comments which y'all win in that giveaway. I'm curious to see if one of my fans can catch the big one. Huge thanks to Trophy Hunter for sponsoring the video. Now, let's get back to it. Let's take a break and look at something much cooler. Up next is the Doom Super Shotgun. What can I say, man? It's a super shotgun. It's freaking cool. I have nothing bad to say about the visual design. But the animations? Oh no, they're awful. Bethesda didn't give this thing custom animations. They just slapped on the Coachman animations with no adjustments whatsoever and called it a day. As a result, your character misses the top lever by a mile. It's blatantly obvious and shatters all hopes of immersion. You can't see the shells being inserted either, and the empty shells don't eject from the gun. They just disappear, as if it's shooting caseless ammunition. That's because it reuses animations from the Coachman. The Coachman uses caseless ammunition, so for that gun, it makes sense. But not so much for the Super Shotgun, because it uses traditional shotgun shells. But funnily enough, you can see the shells in third person. However, when you insert the shells, the position of the shells is way off. They float way in front of your hand. The ejection does look good though, I can't complain there. So this animation looks good for the Super Shotgun, but remember, this is reused from the Coachman. So with the Coachman, this caseless shotgun doesn't eject shells in first person, but it does eject shells in third person. Let me say that again. This caseless shotgun ejects casings. I pointed this issue out 3 years ago, and Bethesda still hasn't fixed it. But hey, at least the melee animation isn't copy and pasted from the Coachman. This is a sawed-off shotgun with no stock, so you can't do a buttstock slap with it. But there is a big bayonet on the front end. So obviously, you should use the huge bayonet to stab people. But no, the Super Shotgun uses a generic pistol whip animation. And since it's a pistol animation, the transition back to idle is super jank. At first your character grips the handle with both hands, like a pistol. But then it abruptly cuts back to the generic long gun idle animation. Wow, these animations are absolutely chopped. And I can't stand using guns with broken animations. Every time I reload this gun, I'm flashbanged with a poorly mismatched animation, and it spikes my cortisol. This shit is literally unplayable. It seems like they intended for you to only use this thing during the little Doom dungeon mission. It's really dark in here, so you can't see the animations clearly. In a dark room, sure, I guess she looks fine. But once you turn on the lights, my god, that's when you realize you made a big mistake when taking home that torta. I think the performance might be even worse. You see, the Super Shotgun is a massive hunk of steel. Its raw size and girth suggests that it would be chambered in something huge, like 4-gauge. 4-gauge is absolutely monstrous. It's total overkill for people, but it would be perfect for slaying giant demons. It's a pretty epic gun in Doom, but in Starfield, it's turbo lame. The raw damage is severely lacking. It's actually outright worse than the Coachman. When fully upgraded, the Coachman can go up to 900 damage, while the Super Shotgun is stuck at 450. Huh? You're telling me the Super Shotgun has half the damage of a typical 12-gauge? Who the fuck balanced this shit? They deserve to be ripped in half vertically by the Doomslayer. Even worse, the Super Shotgun suffers from video game shotgun syndrome. It has a huge range drop-off after like 5 feet. You basically have to shove the barrel down their throat to get a one-shot kill. If you dare try to use it at a reasonable range, like 10 or 15 yards, it'll take multiple shots to kill. In reality, a 4-gauge would obliterate anything at that distance. And as expected for shotguns that suffer from VSS, the pellets disappear into thin air and deal no damage after like 25 yards. It's crazy how Bethesda can take something as awesome as the Doom Super Shotgun and make it suck pure ass. This Super Shotgun ain't so super. High key, this genuinely pisses me off. Bethesda didn't even try. They just ported the model from Doom, slapped on the coachman animations, and punched in random numbers for the damage. Bethesda straight up disrespected the Super Shotgun and the entire Doom franchise by creating this lazy, underpowered reskin. For butchering the Super Shotgun so badly, I'm gonna have to give them an Abyss tier rating. Now let's look at the antique SMG. It's the good old American M3 Grease Gun. The model looks great. It looks just like a grease gun. I don't see a single thing wrong with it. I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to copy and paste a real-life gun. But Bethesda has struggled quite a bit with that in the past. It seems they're finally putting an effort to make their guns historically accurate. But still, this is Bethesda, so there's a few things wrong with how this grease gun functions. The Starfield version fires at 750 rounds per minute, while the real grease gun fires at 450 rounds per minute. I'm not sure why they artificially boosted the fire rate so much. Did they not care to look up the real fire rate, or did they purposely increase it for the sake of gameplay or something? It doesn't matter either way. The slow fire rate is integral to the grease gun's design, so it should have a slow fire rate in games too. The grease gun was specifically built as a cheap SMG that shoots slow to conserve ammunition and to help the user manage recoil. Seeing a grease gun fire this fast is just plain wrong. It feels uncanny. I wouldn't mind if this were a modification, but this is the default state, and by default, the fire rate should be slow and steady. Funnily enough, you can increase the fire rate even more, all the way up to 900 rounds per minute. Now that is absurd! This feels more like a Vector than a grease gun. The recoil's even more absurd. With the first couple shots, it doesn't rise that much. But if you hold down the trigger, it zips up to the moon real quick. This recoil is on the same level as the SMG-12 from Rainbow Six Siege. It's comically high. Given the faster fire rate, the higher recoil does make sense. But the fire rate shouldn't be this high in the first place. The performance of this gun is the complete opposite of what it should be. It has a fast fire rate with comically high recoil, when in reality, the grease gun is a slow-firing SMG with relatively low recoil. Boy, it sure would be helpful if you could retract the stock to get a proper third point of contact to increase control and reduce recoil. But there's no option to retract the stock. Not even an upgrade. It's forever stuck in the retracted position. I can't stand when games do this. It's such a tease. Like, bro, please, it's right there. Let me use the stock! The reload is also wrong, but it could be right. Allow me to explain. You see, this is an OG M3 grease gun. It's the very first model. The M3 has a little crank on the side which is used to charge the bolt, while the later model, the M3A1, doesn't have the crank. They got rid of that part entirely to simplify the design even more. You still need a way to charge the gun though, so they put a big divot in the bolt. That's how you charge it. You dig your finger into the divot and pull back the bolt. The Starfield grease gun is clearly based on the original M3. It has the crank, so you should use the crank. But your character racks it like an A1 by pulling on the bolt directly. So this reload is wrong for an M3, but it would be correct if they used the M3A1 as the model. Looking at it in third person also made me notice how jank the bolt animation is. The grease gun is an open bolt machine gun, meaning the bolt starts in the open position. Then it moves forward to load and fire the round after you pull the trigger. Bethesda has struggled with the concept of open bolt machine guns in their previous games. They've always neglected to show the bolt starting in the open position. These open bolt guns are simply depicted as closed bolt firearms. But the grease gun in Starfield does start in the open position. So finally, Bethesda got this detail correct! But the bolt isn't animated properly. It goes back and forth like a closed bolt, when it should go forth, then back. So that means this bolt isn't traveling forward to load the rounds into the chamber. It shoots bullets right from the magazine. They didn't give this gun a custom firing animation. It looks like they simply copy and pasted the firing animation from another gun. All they did was adjust the starting position of the bolt. Visually, this grease gun looks pretty darn good, but the performance is nothing like the real thing. In the grand scheme of things, I guess this grease gun ain't too bad though. I've definitely seen worse. It's relatively good for a Bethesda gun. So I'll put the antique SMG in the B tier. Next in the World War II collection is the Luger P08, which is referred to as the antique pistol. The model looks perfect. It looks exactly like a Luger, down to the most minute details. I can't find a single pixel out of line here. The guy who modeled this gun did a great job, but this is Bethesda we're talking about, so they still managed to mess it up. The first thing I noticed is that this Luger is chambered in the wrong caliber. It uses 45 ACP, but Lugers either use 9mm Luger or 30 cal Luger. How do you mess that up? Like, dude, the ammunition has Luger in the name, so obviously the Luger uses Luger bullets. You can't miss that unless you're completely illiterate. But okay, if you want to get extremely technical, there is such thing as a 45 ACP Luger. In 1907, the US Army held trials for large caliber handguns, and Mr. George Luger crafted up a custom 45 caliber Luger for them to try out. The 45 caliber Luger performed pretty good. It got second place in the initial trial. The US Army requested a batch of 200 more Lugers for further testing, but DWM, the manufacturer of Luger pistols, declined the request because Germany had just adopted the Luger in 1908. So they shifted focus away from America to produce Lugers for Germany. In the end, the Colt 1911 won the trial. It became the standard sidearm for the US Army, and the rest was history. There wasn't any demand for 45 caliber Lugers in Europe. They stayed chambered in 9mm and 30 cal. Some sources tell me that Mr. Luger only made 2 45 caliber Lugers, but another source tells me 3. Either way, we only know the whereabouts of one 45 caliber Luger. The other one, or 2, are probably stored away in some private collection. Hopefully. The 45 caliber Luger is a unicorn gun. It's turbo rare. So much so that it's dubbed the $1 million pistol. Well, it only sold for about 500,000 back in 2010, but after you account for inflation, if it were sold again today in 2026, it would easily sell for over $1 million. So you're telling me, out of all the Lugers in existence, the one we got in Starfield is the 45 caliber Luger, one of the rarest pistols in the entire universe? You gotta be joking. But if it's no joke, then oh my goodness, this gun must be worth a fortune. Especially when you consider how good the condition is. There is a little bit of wear, which is a nice detail. But considering its age, this thing is in near mint condition. I guess it must have been kept in a vacuum-sealed display case and passed down through the generations with great care. The Space Boomer owner would probably price this thing at 1 billion space credits. No lowballs, sonny. I know what I got. This here Luger is in uber mint condition. But no, turns out it's worth a measly 1,300 space credits. Holy ripoff, Batman. This is 100 times worse than the lowballs on Pawn Stars. Ah, yes. The rarest Luger in the entire universe is nothing more than a cheap budget pistol. It has the same value as a beaten up high point with 10,000 rounds through it. This vendor's offer was so bad, it sent me into a blind rage. I had no choice but to kill everyone on the space station. Now, to be as fair as possible, this could be a reproduction model. There is a guy who makes modern reproductions of the 45 caliber Luger, but even those are super rare and expensive. They're about $7,000, when a regular Luger is like $2 to $3 grand. And they may not be OG, but any 45 caliber Luger is gonna hold a lot of value because they're just so rare. No matter what, even if this were a regular 9mm Luger, this gun should be far more valuable than the plain Jane modern space pistols in Starfield. Would the high value make it worthwhile to use in combat? Of course not. It's an antique pistol from the 1900s. It should suck ass in comparison to the newer pistols of the space age. This gun should mostly be treated as an expensive collectible. Sure, you can use it in combat, but it wouldn't be that great. And that would make using it in combat all the funnier. Flexing on clankers with a 400-year-old Luger is absolutely hilarious. Very chat-like behavior. I guess you could argue that vendors don't know what it is and can't verify its value, but whatever. I wouldn't sell this thing anyway. This gun is absolutely priceless. You can only find this 45 caliber Luger in the Terran Armada flagship. It's locked away in the Admiral's quarters, along with the other 2 antique firearms. That's a pretty good way to implement it. Obviously, this uber rare pistol shouldn't be circulating in the leveled list. It's a true one of one. You can't find it anywhere else. So, maybe this is supposed to be the 45 Luger after all. Wow, if that's actually the case, then that would be a super awesome historical reference. Bethesda must have done some intense research to obtain this elite ball knowledge. But let's be real here. That is most certainly not the case. If you look closer at the model, the serial number and S/42 marking suggests that this pistol was made in the late 1930s by Mauser, so there's no way this is supposed to be the 45 Luger, or a reproduction. When you look at the barrel, that bore doesn't look quite big enough for a 45. It's the same width as a 9mm. A 45 caliber bore would be a little bit bigger. This is clearly supposed to be a 9mm Luger, so why would Bethesda chamber it in 45 when the model indicates otherwise? It's pretty simple really, there's no 9mm in the game. The only old Earth pistol round they have is 45 ACP. They didn't feel like introducing new ammo types for the DLC, so they just chambered this Luger for 45 and called it a day. So please excuse me for going down that huge 45 caliber Luger rabbit hole when I knew the answer the whole time. I couldn't help myself. Sharing niche gun knowledge is my passion, and I hope you guys have enjoyed learning about this cool gun fact. To be as fair as possible, I suppose this could have been done for the sake of gameplay convenience, so the player doesn't have to hunt down proprietary ammunition, but I find that to be supremely unimmersive. I believe that guns in video games should always use the correct ammunition, not only for immersion, but it helps balance out the gameplay too. With the 1911, for example, it's chambered in 45, and it has big damage. Cause as we all know, 45 can blow a hole through a spaceship. The downside with 45 is that it's heavy and has high recoil. It also takes up more space, so you get a lower capacity, and the ammunition itself is kind of expensive. Meanwhile, 9mm is the opposite. It does less overall damage, but on the upside, it's lighter, has less recoil, and it allows you to have a higher magazine capacity. Also, it's about half the price of 45. So if you code a 9mm pistol to use 45 ACP, that creates some problems. Should it have the performance of a 45, or should it have the performance of a 9mm? If you make it perform like a 9mm while consuming 45, then it would be unbalanced, cause you're spending the same price on ammo for less damage. You get a super low value to damage ratio. The other solution is to make the gun perform like a 45 and give it higher damage and recoil. That's probably the most balanced approach, but that means the gun's performance is uncharacteristic. It doesn't perform how it should. Bethesda chose to balance the Luger by giving it higher damage. It performs like a 45. So I guess it's balanced for a 45, but it's not very immersive, because this is supposed to be a 9mm pistol. They absolutely should have added 9mm ammunition to go with the Luger, but to keep it from being used on just the Luger, they could have added more 9mm guns to go with it. That way, the ammo would be widely available and more useful. Imagine if we got the Old Earth Tactical SMG, the MP5, the Old Earth Military Pistol, the Beretta 92. That would be awesome. And if they were really looking for another Old Earth 45 caliber pistol, they should have given us the Mark 23 or something. That would be truly epic. If there is any gun to survive the destruction of Earth, it would most certainly be the Mark 23. This shit is made of unbreakable germanium. Anyway, back to the Luger. Even if I ignore the fact that this Luger is using the wrong ammo, I can't ignore how terrible it feels to shoot. It's absolutely torturous. This gun has a super sluggish fire rate of about 100 rounds per minute. It feels extremely clunky and unresponsive. This semi-automatic firearm has a lower fire rate than a lever action. It's absolutely criminal how they neutered the Luger like this. The hair trigger upgrade doesn't help much. It increases the fire rate by like 15%, which is hardly noticeable. I can't stand this trend in video games, where they put a huge artificial fire rate cap on semi-automatic firearms. All it does is make the gun feel and perform like shit. In reality, you can spam a semi-auto as fast as you can pull the trigger. So, for trained shooters, it's very possible to push a semi-auto over 400 rounds per minute. I'm not sure if the Luger could cycle quite as fast as modern pistols, but from what I've seen, it's very possible to shoot this gun at about 300 rounds per minute. So, around 300 should be the fire rate cap, not 100. The fire rate is literally 3 times lower than what it should be. I can't tell if this was done for the sake of balancing, or if the developers genuinely think the Luger can't shoot fast because of its weird mechanism. It's not like this is a consistent rule for the guns of Starfield. The 1911 shoots really fast. You can shoot it as fast as you can pull the trigger. I remember praising them for giving it such a fast fire rate. It seemed like Bethesda finally learned that semi-automatic guns don't have super low fire rates. But with this DLC, they unlearned that lesson, and now we're back to having artificial fire rate caps. What makes it even worse is that the animations are super scuffed. Firstly, the reload doesn't even show the magazine being removed or inserted. The view model is really close to the camera, so you can't see much. This is all by design, of course. Bethesda intentionally puts their guns really close to the screen, so they can avoid animating the magazine going in and out. All they do is have your character wave their hand back and forth. With the latest Starfield update, you can now increase your field of view, but that doesn't change the perspective of the view model. Your arms are always the same distance from the camera. I wish I could adjust the first-person camera to expose this lazy animation, but sadly, Starfield's latest update broke a bunch of mods, and that includes the mod which allows you to adjust the view model FOV. Bethesda doesn't want us modding the FOV, so we can't see how lazy their animations are. This is a rather minor nitpick though. The biggest issue is that when you rack the action, it gets stuck for a second before completely closing. It's extremely obvious and jarring. Even if you don't know how a Luger works, it should be very apparent that something is wrong. The toggle action shouldn't be getting stuck in place for a second. This broken ass animation is genuinely irritating. It can sometimes mess you up in combat, because the toggle action gets stuck in place while you're trying to aim, combined with the super low fire rate, and it makes me not want to use this gun at all. It's completely ruined. This shit is literally unplayable! In classic Bethesda fashion, this scuffed animation didn't go through any level of quality control whatsoever. Maybe back in 2008, I would let this slide. But animations this sloppy are unacceptable in 2026, especially for such a huge AAA studio like Bethesda. These guys most certainly have the budget to hire good animators, but I guess they just don't care about making high quality animations. They're forever stuck in the Fallout 3 mindset of having super stiff and choppy animations. In the end, this Luger does look pretty darn good. It has potential to reach S tier with a few adjustments, but as is, it's chambered in the wrong caliber, it feels super clunky to use, and it has horrible animations. I'm gonna have to put the antique pistol in C tier, and I feel like that might be a little bit too generous, but just you wait. The next couple guns are even worse. The last of the antiques is the Wimey Revolver. Finally, we have the collectible revolver that your Starfield dad speaks of. You see, if you pick the kid stuff trait, you can visit your parents, and your Starfield dad will give you a collectible revolver called Sir Livingston's pistol. That's an extremely British sounding last name. An old collectible British revolver. That sure sounds like a Wimey, but it's not. It's a 1911, an American-made semi-automatic pistol. Are the developers at Bethesda seriously that clueless? Do they not know the difference between a self-loading pistol and a revolver? Well, knowing Bethesda, that could be the case. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here. It seems like the developers originally intended for Sir Livingston's pistol to be a Wimey, but for whatever reason, they cut that idea right before release and simply used the 1911 to fill in its place. They didn't re-record the dialogue or change the name of the gun. So, as a result, we have a 1911 that's described as a British collectible revolver. Now with this new DLC, we have the Wimey in the game. So, you'd think they would fix Sir Livingston's pistol by turning it into a Wimey. But no, it's still a 1911. This shit is literally unplayable. Anyway, just like the other antiques, the model looks great. It's a perfect recreation of the Wimey. I have no complaints about the visuals. But of course, this is Bethesda, so they managed to mess it up catastrophically in every other way. The first issue is that it's chambered in the wrong cartridge. In real life, the Wimey is chambered for 455 Wimey, but in Starfield, it shoots 45 ACP. They're both 45 caliber, so 45 ACP could fit into a Wimey, but actually shooting it is not a good idea. The Wimey is only rated to shoot the low pressure 455. 45 ACP, on the other hand, is much higher pressure, so if you tried to shoot 45 ACP in a Wimey, it would blow up. With that being said, it is possible to safely fire 45 ACP in a Wimey. Firstly, you gotta shave down the cylinder to fit the ammunition properly. Then you have to make sure to use custom low pressure loads. This was actually a fairly common practice back in the day. British 455 ammo was extremely hard to come by in the States, so people would shave down the cylinder on their Wimey to fit 45 ACP, and then load it with low pressure loads. Nowadays, a couple manufacturers make 455 Wimey. It's not impossible to find, so there's no need to modify the cylinder anymore. But yeah, it's not completely wrong for this Wimey to be using 45 ACP. This is within the realms of possibility, but I really doubt Bethesda did any research on that. There's no way they have this turbo niche ball knowledge. It's pure coincidence. They just so happen to randomly proc the idiot savant perk and get a somewhat correct answer. If you look at the model a little closer, the cylinder isn't shaved down. It's in pristine factory condition, and the ammunition itself looks like 455. It has a rimmed casing, while 45 ACP does not. The back of the casing says 45 though, instead of 455. It gets even more convoluted when you consider that you use moon clips. That would be correct if you were using 45 ACP. You see, revolver ammunition is rimmed, so the ammo doesn't fall through the cylinder. 45 ACP isn't rimmed, so it needs a moon clip to work on a revolver. Either way, I don't think there's moon clips for 455 Webley. It would make more sense if they were using the 455 per dose speedloader. To be fair, that speedloader is extremely rare and hard to come by, and it would be damn near impossible to find 300 years from now. But this is a game, so you don't gotta worry about that stuff. Your character always has an infinite amount of magazines, or hypothetical speedloaders in this case. I think Bethesda just has this weird obsession with moon clips. They also make you use moon clips for the Model 29 in Fallout 4. But the Model 29 isn't cut for moon clips. You should be using a speedloader. If they actually model this Webley with a shaved cylinder and 45 ACP ammunition, then I would fully support it. It would be super cool to see such an obscure historical reference. But this gun isn't modified. It's in factory condition, and visually, it shoots 455. So there's no two ways about it. It should be using 455. Like I said earlier, Bethesda didn't care to add any new ammunition for the DLC. They just chambered all these antique firearms for 45 ACP and called it a day. You could argue it's done for gameplay convenience, but that just feels like a lame excuse. It's really ironic, cause technically, it is possible to find a Luger or a Webley in 45 ACP. They could have gotten away with it if they modeled the guns after their modified versions, but they modeled them after the standard configurations. So it's unacceptable, dare I say, unplayable. I can possibly overlook the ammunition being wrong, but I can't get over how they force you to shoot this gun in single action only. The Webley is a double action revolver. You should simply be able to pull the trigger to shoot. But in Starfield, you have to methodically pull back the hammer every single time. As a result, this gun has an artificially low fire rate and feels super clunky. It can be beneficial to shoot a double action revolver in single action. Doing so lightens up the trigger, which makes it easier to be more accurate. But it shouldn't be mandatory. Double action should be the default, and single action should be an option you can switch to for when you need to make a long-range, precise shot. Bethesda committed this sin 11 years ago back in Fallout 4, but they still haven't learned. Do they not understand that revolvers aren't inherently single action only? Are double action revolvers illegal in Maryland? Do they only have access to single actions or something? Have they never so much as seen a video of a guy firing a double action revolver? I don't think that's the case. The revolvers in Fallout 3 were double action, as they should be. But for some reason only Todd knows why, they changed all that in Fallout 4. They made the Model 29 single action only, and they didn't correct it in Fallout 76. Sadly, the Webley and Starfield got the same treatment. It's artificially nerfed to single action only. Maybe it's done for the sake of gameplay balancing. Like they purposely lower the fire rate so they can raise the damage and make it into a slow firing, but hard hitting hand cannon. But the Webley isn't a hand cannon. 455 Webley isn't that powerful, especially by today's standards. It's a peewee round when compared to a 44 Magnum. This shit is low-key irritating. I always hate when video games completely change the performance of a gun for the sake of balancing. But you know what's really funny? You can upgrade the Webley to have a binary trigger, which drastically increases the fire rate. It basically removes the fire rate cap entirely, so you can spam the trigger at light speed and dump the whole cylinder in 1 plank second. There is no concern for balancing here. This shit is turbo overpowered. In case you're wondering, binary triggers are a real thing. It fires when you pull the trigger, as it normally does, but then it resets and fires again when you let off. So basically, you get 2 shots with 1 trigger pull. These binary triggers are mainly a gimmick though. The only reason why they exist is because machine guns are unobtainable. So the goal of the binary trigger is to increase the fire rate of a semi-automatic and simulate the function of a machine gun. It's not really full auto though. It's like a cucked version of full auto. These triggers aren't meant to be used seriously. They solely serve as range toys. You're forced to shoot 2 rounds with every single trigger pull, but what if you don't want to do that? And why would binary triggers even be present in this setting? Starfield is a space frontier with very little laws and regulations regarding firearms. You can buy full auto machine guns from any vendor with no background check. You can carry your guns around openly and even shoot them in public, and the guards won't care. So clearly, the gun laws in Starfield are very lax. They probably don't have any gun laws at all, which is extremely based. Starfield is a lib-right utopia. Confirmed! But seriously, I don't see why binary triggers would exist in this setting when you could just make the gun full auto with no legal repercussions. I guess some guy at Bethesda saw a YouTube video on binary triggers from 10 years ago, and they thought it was cool. So they decided to put binary triggers into Starfield as a way of saying, "How do you do, fellow gun nerds?" But man, they're really late to the trend. Binary triggers stopped being cool over 5 years ago. They were instantly rendered obsolete when FRTs came out in 2020. Come on, get with the times, old man. I suppose the binary trigger makes for an interesting gameplay mechanic for rifles, but I don't see how this trigger upgrade would be possible on a revolver. Binary triggers work on automatics because they cycle automatically. All it has to do is release the hammer again. But with a double action revolver, it's completely different. They don't have a bolt that cycles back and forth to reset the hammer and trigger. The trigger, hammer, and cylinder are interconnected and move together. So you have to pull the trigger or the hammer to spin the cylinder. You'd have to somehow make it double action in both directions. And I simply cannot fathom how that would work on a revolver. Maybe some mad scientist could figure it out, but it would probably look like some goofy steampunk contraption. And even if this contraption could be made, it would be nothing more than a gimmicky safety hazard. You don't really need a binary trigger if your fingers are fast enough. If you train a lot with a double action, it's very possible to dump all 6 shots in 1 second. If you can't do that unassisted, then you have no business trying to make it quasi-full auto with a binary trigger. And this binary trigger upgrade isn't even real. There's no visual modification made to the gun, nor does the animation change at all. So on your end, when you release the binary trigger, your in-game character cocks the hammer and pulls the trigger again. Wow, that's extremely lazy. You basically have to pretend that you have a binary trigger. And if you shoot fast enough, it skips the animation entirely. It looks super jank. Basically, this upgrade turns the Webley into a fully automatic assault revolver. It feels like a parody. It's like what liberals think binary triggers do. They think you can slap a binary trigger on a revolver and turn it into a minigun with a fire rate of 3,000 rounds per minute. This whole binary trigger upgrade is complete and utter nonsense. It is quite comical, and I can appreciate how ridiculous it is. So if this were a wacky setting like Borderlands, I would fully support it. But this ain't Borderlands. This is Starfield, the realistic and grounded NASA punk sci-fi game where there's 1,000 barren planets with nothing to do on any of them. So in all seriousness, this binary trigger upgrade should be deleted from the game, especially for this particular gun, since it's a revolver. And it's not just this upgrade. All around, these animations are turbo scuffed. When pulling the hammer down, there's a huge delay on the hammer and the cylinder. They lag behind your thumb. The animations are completely out of sync, and since they're out of sync, your thumb clips right through the hammer. Even worse, the hammer falls after the gun goes boom, when it should be before. The hammer is the part that makes the gun go boom in the first place. So, obviously, it should hit the primer first, then go boom. When doing a partial reload, the hammer automatically jumps down by itself, but in reality, you have to manually decock the hammer before breaking it open. This animation is just copy and pasted from the empty reload. There's no difference between the two. But that's the thing, Starfield doesn't have partial reloads. Every gun only has one reload animation, and it assumes that the gun is empty. So that's why this animation looks so scuffed. It just hard cuts to the hammer being down. The reload itself is even worse. When you break it open, the cylinder bugs the fuck out, and it goes sideways for a couple frames. Right after that, the ejector star completely fails to work. The ejector star is the piece that ejects shells from the gun. It needs to move up to eject the shells. But in Starfield, it doesn't move. The casings magically flop out via your character's telekinetic starborn powers. And the animation of the casings flying out looks weirdly stiff and uncanny. When you insert new rounds, you sweep them in at a weird angle, so the bullets clip right through the frame. I also noticed that the model changes depending on how many rounds you shot, which is a nice detail. If you shoot all 6, then all 6 casings will be empty. If you shoot 3, then there'll be 3 spent rounds and 3 unspent rounds with the bullets still in them. But if you shoot 1 round, there'll still be 6 whole rounds. I guess they forgot that one. I'll give them credit for trying though. They got 5 out of 6 at least. But I can't give them credit for reusing the mesh. There's not a separate model for the rounds you just shot, and the rounds that you're putting in the gun. So if you shoot all 6 rounds, your character picks them back up and puts 6 empty casings into the gun. This is a classic Bethesda animation shortcut. They don't animate 2 magazines, or 2 sets of rounds in a moon clip in this case. They reuse the same model throughout the animation. They just make it to where it goes off screen, and your character puts it right back into the gun. It's all an illusion with smoke and mirrors, and Bethesda's counting on the casual slop consumer to never notice these details. But if you pay attention, these corner-cutting strategies become quite obvious. This Webley does look pretty good on the surface, and I have to commend the guy who modeled all the antique guns. They all look great, but the abysmal animations absolutely ruined them. For the antique revolver in particular, sadly, I'm gonna have to place it in the D tier. We've also got the Smith & Wesson Model 686, which is referred to as the Old Earth Revolver. It's pretty darn close to the real thing. The details are spot on. It even has the god-awful Clinton safety lock. Damn, this thing is a perfect replica. The only notable difference is the cylinder release. It was replaced with this weird oblong lever. At first, I thought this was totally made up, but turns out it's a real thing. The purpose of this extended release is to make reloads a little bit quicker. With the default release, you may have to slightly shift your grip around to push it forward. But with this extended release, it reaches further back, and it's perfectly in line with your thumb. So, you don't have to shift your grip at all. You just slightly push your thumb forward. It's a neat little ergonomic upgrade. I like it. I'm just wondering why this is the default, when it should be an attachment. There is no option for a factory cylinder release. Every single 686 in Starfield spawns with this aftermarket part already installed. It's not really a huge deal, but I do find this to be slightly unimmersive. Now, what's truly despicable are the recycled animations. The 686 reuses animations from the Webley. The firing and cycling animations are the exact same. That also means this double-action revolver is artificially limited to being single-action only. This shit is literally... I can't bring myself to use a double-action revolver that's forcibly set to single-action only. It's turbo cringe! And it makes the gun feel horrible to shoot. Todd, please, I beg of you, let me shoot my revolvers in double action. Also, due to the reused Webley animations, the hammer and cylinder are out of sync with your thumb, and there's a bunch of noticeable clipping. The hammer doesn't get pulled all the way back either. It gets stuck like halfway. Another blatant error is that the cylinder spins the wrong way. You see, Smith & Wesson revolvers spin counterclockwise. If it spins the other way, that means it's broken. For other revolvers though, like Colt's and the Webley, they spin clockwise. So for the Webley, this animation is correct. This animation was made for the Webley, and they simply copy and pasted it onto a Smith & Wesson without having a single clue. This shit is literally unfucking playable, dude. I'm uninstalling. At the very least, it doesn't reuse the reload animation. I mean, obviously. There's no way they could get away with reusing a top break animation on a swing-out cylinder. That would be blatantly wrong. Bethesda sure is lazy, but they aren't lazy enough to slap completely mismatched animations onto a gun. Unless they're selling it to US Creation Club DLC, that is. So, I'm actually very impressed they gave this revolver a custom reload. This is like the barest of all bare minimums, but when reviewing Bethesda's guns, I have to lower the bar down to hell to temper my expectations. This reload may be custom, but it's not a very good one. It feels like it was slapped together by a high schooler the night before their animation class final. It's super sloppy and has lots of clipping. Your finger phases right through the gun when pushing out the cylinder. It's extremely obvious. They didn't even try to hide it. After that, your dumbass character places their finger right on the trigger for the rest of the reload. They're not simply hugging the trigger, your finger clips right through it. This is an advanced level of bad trigger discipline. And right after that, your character completely ignores the ejector rod. You just slightly tilt the gun up, and the casings fall right out. Sometimes that does work. Empty casings can slip out of the cylinder simply by tilting the gun. But it's also very common for the expanded casings to get stuck. So that's the whole point of the ejector rod. It's made to eject those stuck casings, and it's best practice to use it for every reload. Another super sloppy part is that the bullets completely separate from the casings. It's the same deal when inserting new rounds. So the bullets are completely disconnected from the casings when you put them in the cylinder. Now that's some premium Bethesda quality control. It's also not ideal to keep the gun horizontally level when inserting new rounds. The rounds may not get seated all the way into the cylinder, which could lead to them falling out, or they may stick out just enough to prevent you from closing the cylinder. It's best practice to point the revolver down to let gravity pull the rounds all the way into the cylinder. And lastly, when closing the cylinder gets pushed way too far to the right, but then it bounces back into position and lines up with the barrel. This shit looks like an exaggerated cartoon animation. What is this? Mouse PI? These have got to be the worst revolver animations in gaming history. Even if you ignore the blatant clipping and horrible technique, it just feels stiff and uncanny. And just like the other DLC guns, this gun is chambered in the wrong cartridge. This is a 357 revolver, and it clearly shows 357 Magnum rounds in the model, and yet it's coded to use 43 Magnum in-game. At this point, I don't even care if you want to say this is for gameplay convenience. The rounds say 357, and this is a 357 revolver, so it should shoot 357. If it shoots anything else, then it's wrong. Unless it's 38 special, because that works too, but that's besides the point. This shit absolutely nukes my immersion. Unfucking playable! At least with the other older guns. I can't just, why is that so funny? Fuck. At least with the other old Earth guns, it is possible for them to use 45, but a 686 chambered in 43 Magnum? That's just made up sci-fi nonsense. Literally impossible. You can't fit anything bigger than 357 into this gun. You would have to completely change the cylinder and barrel and frame, and at that point, it wouldn't be a 686. It would be an entirely different model. If they wanted a modern Smith & Wesson revolver chambered in a bigger round, then they should have just used the Model 629 instead. That's the 44 Magnum version. And why would anyone bother making a new 43 Magnum cartridge when 44 Magnum already exists? Is it really that much better to make it 1/10 of an inch smaller? I really doubt it. It seems like a huge inconvenience to force everyone to switch to 43 Magnum when 44 Magnum is already the standard. It seems like they just slightly changed the number to make it seem more sci-fi, I guess. I also find it funny how you can attach a suppressor on this revolver, cause you can't really suppress a revolver. You see, revolvers have a little gap between the cylinder and the barrel. It's called the cylinder gap. That little gap is necessary to allow the cylinder to spin smoothly. It's not much, but the cylinder gap allows a little bit of the explosion to escape out the side. That's why it's not a good idea to put your thumbs up high and close to the barrel, like what you would normally do with a semi-automatic pistol. If you dare grip it that way, the cylinder gap will cook your thumb like a hot dog. With a revolver, it's best to tuck your thumbs down and out of the way. The cylinder gap is also why you can't effectively suppress a revolver. Even if the muzzle is suppressed, the expanded gases are still going to escape through the gap. So this suppressor attachment is completely pointless. I'm also disappointed there's no option for a 7-round cylinder. One super unique thing about the 686 is that there's an option for a 7-round cylinder. If you're gonna get a 686, you should get the 7-rounder. It's pretty neat, and it sets the 686 apart from other typical 6-shooters. 6 rounds of 357 should be enough to kill anything that moves, but having that lucky 7th round can come in handy. You gotta keep your enemies on their toes, you know. Did I fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, it don't matter, cause I got 7 shots in this revolver. It's such a huge missed opportunity to not include the 7-round cylinder. They got this whole weapon customization system, but they barely take advantage of it. Revolvers inherently aren't gonna have many attachment options, so when there is a chance to add something, developers should most certainly take advantage of it. I guess they spent all their time making the useless suppressor attachment instead. It's too bad. This 686 looks pretty good on the surface, but it's plagued by a whole slew of issues. If I was grading this gun based on looks alone, it would go in S tier, but the wrong ammunition and erroneous suppressor attachment drops it down to B tier. When you account for the god-awful animations and mandatory single-action fire, that drops it all the way down to D tier. The only thing keeping it from F tier is that the model itself looks pretty good. But I can't believe this crap is sold as official DLC from a massive AAA studio in 2026. Bethesda's animation team is getting mogged by Roblox game creators. Now let's move on to the Space AR-15, the MGP. I have no clue what that could possibly stand for. Probably mega gay penis or something. But anyway, this is a huge achievement for Bethesda. Finally, they put an AR-15 into one of their games. It seems like this is their response to all the criticism they received for how terrible their gun designs are.
You don't like our sloppy sci-fi greebly nonsense? Fine, we'll give you a bog standard AR-15. Are you happy now?
Yes, Todd. Thank you. This is all I've ever wanted. The Space AR-15 is peak sci-fi gun design. Some people are probably going to say it's lame and uninspired for them to add a basic AR-15 to a futuristic sci-fi game, and yeah, I can understand that sentiment. But in terms of practicality, it makes perfect sense. To me, I find it really fascinating to theorize how our rifles would actually look like in the future, and the truth is, it would probably look like an AR-15. just slightly updated with some futuristic stuff. You see, modern-day firearms are considered a mature technology. That means we've reached the peak of development, and there's not much we can do to improve them further. The main things to improve upon are attachments, optics, and ammunition. So in the future, it's very likely we'll be seeing the same firearms we have today, just with some new bells and whistles on top. It's crazy to think how the AR-15 was designed in the 1950s, and that core design has stayed unchanged for 70 years. It's simply a timeless design. It doesn't need to change because you can't improve upon perfection. It's got good performance, it's versatile with super high customizability, it's pretty darn reliable, it's got great ergonomics, and it's super easy to break down and maintain. It's not very expensive to produce either. The AR-15 has everything you want out of a rifle, and that's why so many guns are slowly turning into ARs. It's like what happens in nature with crabs. A crab is the ideal physical form, so creatures that aren't technically crabs slowly end up evolving into crab-like crustaceans over time. The same thing happens with guns. A lot of guns are adopting AR-like features, because those features are highly desirable. So everything is slowly converging into being an AR, just with a gas piston system instead of using direct impingement. There's loads of examples, like the HK416, the HK433, the MCX, the ACR, the XCR, the SCAR, the APC556, and the Howa Type 20. All these guns are different, like their handguards, stocks, and internal parts may vary, but they all have that vague AR-like silhouette and share AR-like ergonomics. They all have their firing mode selectors, bolt releases, and magazine releases in the same spot, just like the AR-15. Also, all these rifles accept AR-15 magazines. It's logistically very efficient to have a bunch of different rifles that share the same magazine. Going into the future, it's very likely this core AR-style design will stick around. So, if you want to make a near-future sci-fi game with practical firearms, there has to be at least one AR-15 style rifle. And I'm not saying it has to be a strict AR-15 copy. It could be based on something slightly different, like the HK433 or the APC556. Those designs are super underrated, and I would like to see them more in video games. And allow me to be as clear as possible, because I know some stupid chud redditors are going to try and take me out of context. No, I don't want every single gun in sci-fi games to have a generic AR-style blueprint. Because yeah, that would be kind of boring if everything looked the same. I'm just saying, there should be at least one, maybe even two or three. But there should also be plenty of unique designs to spice things up. Variety is the spice of life, as they say. I sure love me a good practical AR-15, but for my personal collection, I've got a bunch of niche random bullshit, simply because I think it's cool. I really don't understand those people that have like 50 guns, and half of them are just slightly different AR builds. Like yeah, AR-15s are awesome, but not everything should be an AR-15. So many people like to prop up this straw man argument where they say, oh, Brandy Boy believes that every sci-fi gun should be an AR-15, and anything else that deviates from that is bad. No, I don't think that. These redditors sure love making up fake arguments to get mad at. Motherfuckers just be making shit up. Anyway, let's get back to the MGP. Overall, this gun looks pretty good, especially for a Bethesda gun. It's basically just an AR-15 with a sci-fi aesthetic, and I really dig that M-LOK handguard. M-LOK is the future, so it really suits the futuristic setting. I also like the ergonomic grip with the finger grooves and the M4 style collapsible stock. This one's got a nice rubber butt plate on it, so it probably feels pretty decent to shoulder, unlike the mil-spec M4 stock. That shit fucking sucks. The irons are pretty slick too. They look an awfully lot like the Troy flip-up battle sights. That's a good pick. I like those irons. I got them on my AR-10. I also love how the flash hider looks just like a Surefire 3-prong with the quick detach suppressor mount. Man, this gun has a nice set of attachments on it. It looks like the designer knew what he was doing here. The ambidextrous features are a nice bonus too. You got an ambi safety, an ambi mag release, ambi charging handle, and there's this cut on the left side of the receiver, so it looks like you can swap out the bolt and change which side the shells eject from. That's pretty sweet. It's very convenient for lefties, so they don't have to hunt down a specific left-handed model. Unlike the other guns in Starfield, the MGP doesn't have a huge load of random sci-fi greebles all over the place. It looks pretty clean. I mean, there are some greebles, like a bunch of random screws on the receiver, but that's about it. I think the worst part about this rifle is the chunky piece of plastic below the handguard. Why is that on there? You've already got this perfectly normal M-LOK style handguard, so there's no sense in adding this chunk of plastic on the bottom. It takes up the whole bottom rail, so you can't attach any other grips. This is supposed to be your grip, and it's your only option. The only attachment you get for the bottom rail is a bipod, and you can't even use it. It's also silly how the bottom pick rail seemingly floats below the handguard. It only connects in one spot, which doesn't seem very secure or sturdy. It'd make more sense for the bottom rail to be integral to the handguard, and this huge plastic bit should be deleted entirely. Better yet, they should just get rid of all the pick rails and make the whole thing M-lock. There's really nothing wrong with pick rails. They work fine, and they sure are sturdy. But M-lock is all around better, because it uses negative space for mounting. Punching holes in the handguard makes the gun a little bit lighter, and less weight to lug around is very desirable. It might only be a few ounces, but when lugging around a rifle all day, ounces turn into pounds. Not only that, but M-lock handguards give you a smooth surface and a slimmer profile, which allows you to get a firm and aggressive grip. The better your grip, the better you can control the recoil. So all around, M-lock is better, and that's why it's taken over. There's still a lot of guns with pick rails in active service, but there's not many new guns coming out that still use pick rails. Pretty much everything has shifted towards M-lock, and in the future, pick rails will likely be phased out entirely in favor of M-lock. So I really like how this rifle features an M-lock style handguard. That's exactly how a futuristic rifle should be built. I'm just wondering why they tacked on this big, bulky grip and a pick rail segment on the bottom. It's completely pointless and counterintuitive. Well, I know exactly why they tacked on this stupid grip. I know Bethesda too well. They purposely make their handguards oversized. It's a tradition that goes all the way back to Fallout 3, and it's more prevalent than ever in Starfield. Take note of how there's so many guns that have chunky, oversized handguards. Not one of them has a slim profile. Now pay attention as I cycle through all these guns. You notice how the equip animation is identical, and the way your palm and fingers are curled is the exact same? That's because it's the same animation. At most, all they do is slightly reposition the hand if the handguard is lower or higher than normal, but the way you hold it is the exact same across every long gun. So basically, Bethesda purposely makes their handguards excessively bulky so they can reuse the same idle animation as much as possible. That's precisely why the AK has an extra polymer handguard slapped on top of its already existing wooden handguard. They tacked on that extra bulk so the generic idle animation lines up better. The handguard has to have a certain amount of height and girth, or else it'll look like the gun is floating above your hand. It's the laziest shit ever. Instead of making new animations, they fatten up their gun designs to fit that one preset animation. Funny thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. They could have made this preset animation to fit a slimmer handguard, and make all the handguards slim to fit that animation. But I guess Bethesda just likes the chunky, obese aesthetic. They don't even have to make an entirely new idle animation for every single gun. All they have to do is make 3 different grip animations, one for bulky, medium, and slim. But they can't even be bothered to do that. Bethesda's animation team is turbo lazy. They deserve to be launched into deep space. Looking at the handguard also made me notice how the gas system is upside down. You see this tube below the barrel? That's the gas tube. That's the part that makes the bolt cycle back and forth automatically. And it should be above the barrel. It has to be above the barrel to push gas into the gas key at the top of the bolt carrier. You can't really do it from the bottom, cause the magazine gets in the way. I mean, there are guns that have their operating system below the barrel, like the M14, but it doesn't run directly into the bolt in a straight line. It diverts off to the side. The MGP clearly doesn't function like an M14. It's obviously supposed to be an AR, so the gas tube should be above the barrel. I sure would like to see a detailed x-ray of how this gun works, or doesn't work. And yeah, if I clip into the gun with the free cam, you can see how the gas tube just runs into the magazine and cuts off abruptly. It's not connected to the bolt carrier in any way. I'm not sure how they managed to turn this operating system upside down. It's kind of funny, because the handguard has a cutout, and the whole point of a cutout on the handguard is to give you access to the gas system, so you can adjust it. Either that, or a cutout is used to allow clearance for a fixed front sight post. This futuristic rifle doesn't have a fixed front sight, so I can only assume the purpose of this cutout is to allow you to adjust the gas system. But the gas system isn't there. It's upside down, so you can't get to it. Wow, that's quite a huge design flaw. They didn't really think this one through. The buffer tube is malformed as well. It's not a nice round shape. It's an irregular hexagon. You see, on the AR-15, the bolt carrier reciprocates into the buffer tube, and the bolt carrier is a round shape. So the buffer tube is a round shape. It makes sense to put the circle into the circle hole, but this is Bethesda. They have a hard time fitting the right shapes into the right holes. I guess this could work if the bolt carrier was the same irregular hexagonal shape, but that would be extremely goofy. This is what happens when artists try way too hard to make a gun look sci-fi. They wanted this gun to have nothing but sharp angles with zero roundedness whatsoever to make it look more sci-fi. Because as we all know, sci-fi is when sharp angle. Round shapes aren't allowed, because they're associated with old-timey aesthetics like 1950s atom punk. That would explain why the guns in Fallout 4 are so round and bubbly. The artists went all in on the bubbly atom punk aesthetic, and forbade themselves from using sharp angles. I can understand wanting to fit an art style, that's cool, but there comes a point where it's a bit too much. There needs to be a balance between style and practicality to achieve a perfect design. I'm also wondering what this futuristic AR-15 is chambered for. Is it something entirely new and futuristic like caseless or case telescopic ammunition? We see those types of rounds used in the other futuristic guns in Starfield, which is really cool. So, what is the MGP using? Bog standard 7.62. Wow, that's kinda lame. And I would assume that means 7.62 by 51. So, I guess this is an AR-10 then, not an AR-15. The recoil sure makes it seem like a 308. This gun kicks and knocks you around like you're getting rocked by prime Mike Tyson. Damn, even for a 308, I think this recoil is a bit too dramatic. AR-10s do got a good bit of recoil to them, it's a lot more than a 5.56, but they aren't this violent. Out of all the 308 battle rifles, I would say the AR-10 is the smoothest shooter. That's all thanks to its unique buffer tube system. It greatly reduces felt recoil. So, this recoil animation needs to be toned down quite a bit. Unless we assume your Starfield character is a Californian descendant with no gun skills. Then sure, in that case, an AR-10 would knock around a total noob. Well, turns out there's no way this gun is shooting 7.62 by 51. Looking back at the model, the magazine isn't wide enough for a 308. It looks like a 30-round 5.56 magazine. And when looking at the ejection port and bolt, yeah, it looks to be sized for a standard 5.56. A 308 bolt is noticeably larger. It's still coded to use 7.62 though, and the only other gun in the game that uses 7.62 is the AK. So, that means this AR is using 7.62 by 39 then? I guess so. But man, it sure would be nice if they fully labeled the ammunition. There's like a dozen different 7.62 rounds. So, simply saying a gun shoots 7.62 doesn't let you know which exact 7.62 round it shoots. You can't see it in normal gameplay, but if you clip through the magwell and look at the magazine, it is labeled as 7.62 by 39. But that can't be right, because the rounds in the magazine are totally disproportionate for a 7.62 by 39. These rounds are a much closer match to 5.56. And why the fuck are they blue? Is it cause blue is more sci-fi or something? I don't know, man. Either way, this gun shouldn't be using 7.62 by 39. Even if the rounds were modeled correctly, the magazine is the wrong shape. You see, magazines need a certain curve to them to fit the shape of the round. A cartridge with a heavy taper, like 7.62 by 39, needs a big curve so it can fit and feed properly. That's why AK magazines are so curved. And 7.62 by 39 magazines for AR-15s have a sharp curve. They're really goofy looking. So if they really wanted a 7.62 by 39 AR, the magazine should look more like this. As is, this gun should be using 5.56. Man, this gun is extremely confusing. Visually, it looks like a 5.56, but it performs like a 308, and it's coded to use 7.62 by 39. Even funnier, it ejects the 6.5mm CT round used by the Maelstrom. My god, this is a catastrophic fuck-up on the same level as the combat rifle from Fallout 4. They somehow managed to get the cartridge it fires completely wrong in every single aspect. That's an impressive feat that only Bethesda can pull off. They are masters at not knowing what their guns are supposed to be shooting. At the very least, when you convert it to full auto, the recoil becomes much more tame. It feels more like a 5.56, as it should. However, this upgrade also greatly lowers the damage. It's like you're shooting a completely different caliber, but you're not. Why would switching the fire selector cause the rifle's damage and recoil to change so drastically? Because video game balancing, of course. Game developers tend to nerf the hell out of machine guns for the sake of balancing. They don't want full auto guns having way higher DPS values than semi-autos, or else the semi-autos would be underpowered in comparison. I understand the need to balance a game, but this is balanced the wrong way. The damage and recoil changing so drastically, simply because the fire rate is faster or slower, is completely illogical and highly unimmersive. The semi-auto mode should do the same damage as the full auto mode. It should be objectively worse in terms of DPS, but it should be balanced out to where the full auto mode has too much recoil to be used at long range. Up close, you should use full auto for maximum DPS. But at range, you should switch to semi, or manually tap fire to actually hit your shots. There's so many ways you can balance a gun besides changing the damage numbers. That's a super lazy and boring way to go about it. If you want to make a semi-auto do more damage than a full auto, then it has to shoot a more powerful round. If there was an upgrade to rechamber this gun to something more powerful, like 50 Beowulf, then sure, the higher damage and recoil would make perfect sense. It would be immersive and balanced at the same time. And why exactly do I need to modify the rifle to make it full auto in the first place? It should be select fire by default. Well, to be fair, there's only 2 selections on the fire selector. There's safe and fire. There's no third option for full auto. So visually, it does check out. But why would this gun be semi-auto only in the first place? You could argue it's supposed to be a civilian rifle, but I don't see why civilian rifles would be locked to semi-auto in this setting. This is a space frontier with very little laws and regulations. When looking at the gun's markings, it's made by Allied Armaments in New Atlantis, so that implies this is supposed to be a service rifle for the military and policemen of the United Colonies. There is no 2 ways about it. This rifle should be select fire by default, but the real reason why it's not is because Bethesda doesn't have a firing mode mechanic. The guns are either semi or full auto at all times. You can't simply press a hotkey to switch, unlike in other games. To switch firing modes, you have to take the gun to a workbench. And you aren't simply switching the firing mode. It requires certain perks and you spend materials. So that implies you're modifying the rifle in some way. Maybe Bethesda doesn't know that you can simply flip a switch, or maybe it's done for the sake of having upgrades and progression. The latter may very well be the case, but I don't care. I shouldn't have to modify an assault rifle to make it full auto. All these guns should be select fire by default. I also have to comment on that reload technique. How come your character always racks the charging handle? I mean, sure, you can do that, but it's a little bit slower than simply hitting the bolt release. You see, most modern rifles, such as the AR-15, have a bolt hold open feature combined with the bolt release. So when the magazine runs dry, the bolt locks open, then you insert a new magazine and hit the bolt release to chamber the first round. You really only need to use the charging handle to load the first mag. After that, you can use the bolt release on every subsequent reload. So how come your character doesn't hit the bolt release then? Well, there is no bolt release on this rifle, and the bolt doesn't lock open on empty. In fact, the bolt doesn't move at all. It's not animated. It's a permanently closed bolt rifle. Broken animations aside, why would they get rid of such a handy little feature? You'd think a futuristic AR-15 would have better ergonomics than our modern day rifles, or it would at least be on par. But for some reason, this design is objectively worse. I can't say it's a huge mystery though. I've seen quite a few games do this. It seems that game developers do this on purpose because racking the charging handle looks cooler than simply hitting a button. I guess, but you could also argue that slapping the gun looks cooler. It's very subjective. Either way, using the charging handle is a little bit slower, so this reload is artificially slower than it needs to be. It's only like half a second, so it's not a huge deal, but I do find it to be slightly annoying nonetheless. In my opinion, the charging handle should only be used during the equip animation, and potentially a jam animation if the game has a jam mechanic. For regular reloads though, you should always use the bolt release. And one more thing, what's up with the optics? How come this futuristic aimpoint red dot isn't a red dot? It functions as a scope. That's the dumbest shit ever. I mean, it's called the short scope, but this clearly isn't supposed to be a magnified scope. It's visually a red dot. The holographic sight is highly unimmersive as well. The reticle is plastered directly onto the glass, like someone drew it on there with a Sharpie. That's not how holographic sights work, bro. The reticle is projected onto the lens, so it stays in line with your target, no matter where you move your head. If it's simply painted onto the glass, that shit ain't gonna be accurate whatsoever. Okay, I think I finally exhausted all my dialogue for the MGP. Forgive me for yapping so long. I was not planning for this one to last about 20 minutes. I think the overall shape and aesthetic of the MGP is fine. It does have potential to be a great design, but it's littered with a boatload of errors. One by one, these little errors aren't that bad, but man, there's a lot of them, so it really adds up. In the end, I think I'm gonna have to place the MGP in the C tier. Huh, this space AR-15 isn't peak sci-fi gun design after all. It's actually extremely mid. Okay, that wraps up everything wrong with the DLC guns in Starfield. Overall, it's a mixed bag. On one hand, we got a fairly decent sci-fi rifle. It may have a lot of problems, but it's better than most of the slop in Starfield. On the other hand, we got the worst sci-fi gun design of all time. The contrast between the MGP and the breech block is absolutely insane. You're telling me these two guns are from the same game? Bethesda needs to figure out what art style they're going for. If they truly want a grounded NASA punk art style, which is what I assume they want, then they should stick with gun designs like the MGP. But if they want sloppy sci-fi nonsense, then sure, make more breech blocks. I fully support it, because I love ragging on shitty gun designs. In the middle, we got a bunch of antique real-life firearms. Their models sure look good, but the animations are atrocious, and they're filled with all kinds of other problems under the surface. Then there's the Super SLOP Gun, which looks good, but it suffers from erectile dysfunction. It just feels like a half-assed port from Doom. It's a huge disappointment. I'm also disappointed that's all we got, just 7 ballistic firearms. 4 out of 7 are real-life guns from Old Earth, and 1 is a design from another game. So really, we only got 2 new designs here, the Breach Block and the MGP. I was kinda hoping they would flesh out the sci-fi ballistic arsenal with a lot more weapons, but it seems Bethesda ran out of creativity juice. Who knows, man, maybe they'll release more Starfield DLC in the future. Before anyone says it, yes, I know, there's also a bunch of energy weapons added by these DLCs, and I will be covering them in part 2. Why didn't I include them in this video, you may ask? Because frankly, that would make it way too long. It would probably be over 2 hours, and I swear, I'm trying my best not to make these videos 2 hours long. I know it can be hard to sit down and watch a YouTube video for 2 hours straight, but man, there's just so much wrong with these guns. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't cover every single detail. After all, this series is called Everything Wrong with the Guns, so I want to go over everything. Anyway, if you guys would like early access to the next video, or would simply like to support the channel, be sure to check out my Patreon. I'm working on a lot of cool stuff right now, and the patrons will be the first ones to see what I'm up to. Okay, that's it for the day. You guys know the drill. Make sure to nuke that like button, and subscribe and comment, and all that good stuff. I'll see y'all in the next video.